Welcome to another tutorial. I wanted to go into a more traditional topic this time around and talk about the financial statements and three-statement projections for private equity funds. As I write here in the title slide, it is a bit of an upside-down world because you do see a lot of differences that make them quite different from the three financial statements and projections for normal companies. Now, it's pretty easy to find examples of three-statement models for normal companies. In fact, one of the most popular videos on this channel actually covers this exact topic, how to build a three-statement model starting from a blank Excel sheet. But it's a lot harder to find specialized models, especially quality ones, for something like a private equity fund rather than a traditional company. Now, this topic is not very likely in case studies, but interview questions about it could still come up, particularly if you interview for funds of funds roles at a sovereign wealth fund or a private equity fund of funds or something like that, rather than a pure secondaries role. So for all the files and resources here, you'll want to go to this URL on screen. I'll pin this below the video as the first comment. It's on our financial sponsors page, and then go to private equity fund financial statements. This is also a summary or short excerpt from our full private equity funds of funds and secondaries course. Let's start with the overall differences here. I'm going to bring up a very simple example of an Excel file for a private equity fund three-statement model, and I will show you some of the highlights and then go through the formulas in more detail. The first key difference is that standard line items like cost of goods sold and operating expenses do not appear on the income statement. Instead, it's structured a little bit more like a bank's income statement with gains and losses, investment income, interest expense, and things like that. And so you can see right here that our income statement for this private equity fund has unrealized and realized gains and losses. We have net investment income, and then we have management fees and fund expenses, but you don't see EBITDA or operating income or even something like revenue. So it's quite different structurally from a normal company. The second major difference is that most private equity funds are structured as pass-through entities, so there are no corporate level taxes or related lines for deferred taxes, for example. And you can see right here that we go straight from the gains and losses down to net income, and there's nothing for corporate income taxes on the income statement. The third major difference is that the cash flow statement is organized differently, and many investing lines that are traditionally in cash flow from investing are instead in cash flow from operations, because for a private equity fund, investing is an operational activity. So let's go down and take a look at this. You can see here that funding of investments and proceeds from sale of investments, these are typically lines that would be in cash flow from investing for a normal company, but for a private equity fund, they're considered operational activities. And in fact, we don't even have a cash flow from investing section because everything is just consolidated and combined right here. And then the last major difference is that equity on the balance sheet is typically called partners' capital, and it's split between the limited partners, the outside investors, and the GP or GPs, the private equity fund partners that are actually operating the fund. And each one changes based on slightly different criteria. Carried interest affects each of these differently as well. So those are the key high-level differences. Now I want to go through some of the Excel formulas in more detail and show you exactly how this model is set up. So we're going to start with gains, losses, and carried interest. Then I will go through the income statement for a PE fund and show you some of the differences and formulas there. We'll go through the balance sheet and cash flow statement, and then I'll explain how in real life it gets even more complicated, and I'll explain some of what you have to do differently and some of the additions that you'd see for a real life private equity fund model. So let's get started with the gains and losses and carried interest and some of the Excel formulas for these. Now I'm bringing up a version of the file here where some of the formulas, but not everything, have been deleted, and this is purposeful because I don't necessarily want to go through every single line item here. I just want to show you the key highlights. So ideally, when you start doing this, you'll have information on each portfolio company's cost basis, fair market value, and realizations, but you're not always going to get this. Sometimes you might just get a high-level summary of the entire fund. With unrealized gains and losses, if there are unsold portfolio companies, this should equal their current fair market value minus the cumulative investment so far. And as this fair market value keeps changing, you'll have to keep adjusting these unrealized gains and losses. With the realized gains and losses, these in this simple model can be equal to the cumulative realizations minus either the company's unrealized values in the previous period or the total investment so far minus the previous realized gains or losses. So in other words, we're trying to either allow for a case where maybe they've held the companies for a while and they've kept marking them to market value and now they sell them, or maybe they've just acquired them very recently, maybe in the past year, and they do a very quick sale, and this setup handles both of these. Now, this is not a fully robust setup. It only works for very certain specific scenarios here, and it's really just to teach the concepts. But let's go in and enter these formulas anyway. We have this scenario here where the PE fund has invested $100 million. Now, the value of these portfolio companies goes up to $120 million, and then in year 3, they sell them for $150 million. So for the unrealized gains or losses, I will say that if our value here is not equal to 0, then we will take our unrealized values right here, and then we will simply subtract all of our investments so far. So F13 through F13, and then if our value here is actually 0, I'll just say 0 for this, and I'll copy this across, and you can see how since the portfolio company's value goes from 100 million to 120 million, we get 20 million of unrealized gains in year 2. Now for the realized gains, it's a little bit more complicated. Here, we have to look at this, and if our realizations are not equal to 0, then we are going to take the cumulative sum of all of our realizations so far, so F15 through F15, and then we're going to subtract either the unrealized values. So if these are not equal to 0, we're just going to subtract that and assume that represents what all these companies are worth. Otherwise, though, if they are equal to 0 and we have some type of quick flip setup where maybe they make a bunch of acquisitions and then they sell the companies very quickly, then we're going to subtract the cumulative sum of all of our investments so far. So E13 through E13 here, and I'll anchor the E part of the first E13, and I'll say 0 otherwise. And then we also want to subtract all of our previous realized gains right here. And the reason why I'm doing that is because if we sell these companies in parts, so maybe we sell 2/3 in year 2 and then 1/3 in year 3, we also want to be able to handle that case. This is not a great formula. It's a little bit confusing and convoluted, but for this simple scenario here where we only allow these investments in the first 2 years and sales in the last 2 years, it's a decent result, and it does produce the correct realized gain here, where the portfolio companies go from 120 million to 150 million, we sell them at 150 million and get the 30 million realized gain there. Now for the accrued and realized carry, so the accrued carry builds up based on the value of unrealized portfolio companies increasing. The realized carry is based on whatever we sell the companies for minus whatever they were previously marked at. So this is actually pretty simple if you think about it. We're just going to take the unrealized gains and then multiply by 20% right here. And then for the realized carry, we're going to take the realized gains and multiply by the 20% right here and add these up. Now this has the obvious problem of the fact that accrued carry, it's fine to go down. It's fine to be negative if the portfolio company's value decreases. So if this falls to 90 million, then yes, we can have the change in accrued carry here turn negative. But it doesn't really make sense for the realized carry here to turn negative if we somehow sell these companies at a loss. It would simply be 0 in that case. So there would be some more error checking in real life, but I think you get the basic idea for how this works. I also want to point out that in real life, we'd have to really set up a waterfall schedule and allocate the management fees and do a proper hurdle rate check and do a preferred return and catch-up schedule. So it gets a lot more complicated, but this is just the basic idea for now. Let's go to the income statement next. Now the hard part is the gains and losses, which we've already set up. There may be investment income and interest expense. So the PE fund could have other investments that generate interest income or dividends or things like that. Also, they could use a fund level borrowing facility. Sometimes it's used to temporarily fund investments or to pay for expenses, and there could be interest expense on that. The management fees and fund expenses are typically a simple percentage of the committed capital, usually around 2% initially, falling to 1 or 1.5% over time, or they could be a percent of the net asset value or the remaining cost basis of portfolio companies. The bottom line is that the income statement still ends with net income, but it is a pre-tax version of net income because of the fact that most PE funds are pass-through entities. So to set this up, really we just need to add the management fee and fund expenses line here. And in this case, it's a $200 million fund, so $200 million of committed capital, and we'll just multiply by the management fee percentage of 2% right there. And so we have that. And so we have our net income and our income statement filled out. Let's go to the next part and talk about the balance sheet and cash flow statement. And really, we need to start with the cash flow statement here because we need this to get to many of the line items on the balance sheet. Now, the cash flow statement usually starts with net income and then reflects investment funding, the proceeds from portfolio company sales, and reverses all the gains and losses that are shown on the income statement. This last part is very standard. Any cash flow statement in any industry will do this, but the part about investment funding and proceeds from portfolio company sales, those are the non-standard parts that are specific to private equity funds. In cash flow from financing, you're going to see lines for distributions, contributions, and then realized or distributed carry, as well as the changes in debt if the PE fund is using a fund level borrowing facility. So let's go to Excel and look at how this works. I'm not going to go through every single line item here, but I will show you a couple of the highlights. So as with a normal company, we still start with net income. The difference is that we're now going to reflect the funding of investments. And to get this, we can go right up here to this line, investments, individual or entire portfolio. And this will be a negative right here because it is a cash outflow. And then we have the proceeds from sale of investments. This will be a positive because it is a cash inflow. So we'll link to row 15 right here, the realizations for the entire portfolio. And then the unrealized gains and realized gains and losses, we're just going to reverse these based on what is shown on the income statement. So let's go up here, put a negative sign in front, and then let's see what this looks like. And so you can see right here, we fund 100 million of portfolio companies. We have an unrealized gain of 20 million, which is reversed. And then we eventually sell these portfolio companies for 150 million for a realized gain of 30 million, which is also reversed on the cash flow statement. And like I said, these last two parts are very standard. The first two parts are quite different. Now, I said that cash flow from financing shows distributions, contributions, realized or distributed carry, and the changes in debt. And you can see all those line items right here. The contributions are based on what we need for funding investments and also for funding management fees and fund expenses. The distributions are a little bit complicated to explain, but essentially what we're doing is taking the realizations and then we're factoring in the carried interest here, but effectively we're only factoring in the realized carried interest when there's actually a realization in the period, and we're deducting that and saying, even if we sell these companies for 150 million, because of the way carried interest works, only 140 million will go to the LPs, and then 20% of the profit portion, so 50 million of profits times 20% is 10 million, that's what will go to the GPs here as carried interest. And you can see it in the formulas here. They look a little bit intimidating maybe, but I think the actual numbers here are fairly intuitive. Now on the balance sheet, with the cash flow statement filled out, we can fill in some of these line items. The fair market value of investments equals the old number minus all the relevant cash flow statement line items. And then the LP and GP capital works similarly to equity for a normal company, except one major difference is that when the accrued carry changes, this will actually end up affecting both line items. The distributed or realized carry, by contrast, affects only the GP's capital right here. So let's see how this works. For the fair market value of investments, we're going to take the old number, and then we're going to subtract everything that's relevant on the cash flow statement or on the asset side in the balance sheet, which means that we subtract all links to cash flow statement line items here. That's just how the math and the mechanics work. So funding of investments, proceeds from sale, unrealized and realized gains, all those are going to factor in. We'll copy that across. And then for the partner's capital, so the limited partner's capital works very similarly to the equity account for a normal company. So we take the old number and then we add the net income right here. And then we go down and add the LP contributions and the LP distributions. And then the one part that's different is that we also have to factor in the carried interest right here. We subtract it because when it accrues, this means that more of this is now earmarked or allocated for the GPs. And when it's paid out, we literally pay something to the GPs. So it's going to reduce the equity or the capital of the limited partners right here. And then for the general partners, we'll take the old number. This is pretty simple. We're just going to factor in the change in carried interest once again, and we're also going to factor in whatever we actually pay out to the GPs in this period right here. We have that, and now our balance sheet balances. And you can see how this builds up very simply. As the PE fund makes investments, we say that 100 million of this is for the limited partners, but then as they get this 20 million gain on it, this unrealized gain, we say that 20% of that goes to the GPs and then 80% goes to the LPs. So this increases to 116 million. And then when the realizations take place and we sell all these companies, both these accounts simply go to zero. So Again, I think the formulas here are maybe a little bit tricky, but I think the intuition with this simple set of numbers is pretty easy to understand if you understand the economics of a private equity fund. So what makes this more complex in real life? I'm going to pull up a version of the model here that is a lot more detailed and goes down to the level of individual companies to illustrate this. The first point is that when you actually model individual companies, you're going to need separate schedules and formulas and allocations for them. And so you can see right here that we have a whole schedule with the investments and the management fees and the fair market values by company in this specific portfolio. We also track the remaining cost basis of each company. There's also typically a 2% GP commitment in real life, which means that the GPs act effectively as very small limited partners in the private equity fund. And what this means is that when you have an item like net income, for example, it may be split up between the GPs and the LPs because the GPs are a very small limited partner of this fund as well. And you can see this if you look at the distributions and the contributions on other line items as well. There are usually payment deferrals and deferred distributions because when a PE fund sells a company, it's not going to get the proceeds right away. It usually takes 3 months, 6 months, maybe even up to a year for the deal to close and for the proceeds to come through. And so this complicates how working capital operates. You'll see much bigger numbers for accounts receivable and accounts payable, for example. And then finally, specific portfolio company exits make the carried interest calculation trickier because you need to allocate management fees to companies. And something else that I didn't even mention, but I'm seeing now, is that the line of credit tends to be used much more aggressively by private equity funds. So you see a buildup here, you will see major line items for interest expense on the income statement, which is going to have a pretty substantial impact on net income as well. So there are a lot of other factors going on here, and in real life, it can get quite a bit more complicated to model this type of fund. But what we've gone through here should give you an idea of the main differences and the basic concepts. To do a quick recap and summary now, gains, losses, and carried interest. The formulas get a little bit complicated, but the basic ideas are not too hard to understand. Essentially, what we're doing is looking at the fair market values of portfolio companies and comparing them to their cost basis to get the unrealized gains. For the realized gains, we have to see if there's actually been a realization in the period and then subtract either the previous cost bases, the previous investments, or the previous fair market values, depending on how this is set up. Carried interest then is based on a percentage of these unrealized or realized gains, but in real life, you'd have to run through a waterfall and check the hurdle rate and do a bunch of other things to set this up properly. On the income statement, the gains and losses are really the hardest part. You will also see investment income and interest expense, and of course the management fees, and the net income as a pre-tax version at the bottom. With the balance sheet and cash flow statement, the cash flow statement starts with net income and has funding of investments and proceeds from sale of investments. It reverses the gains and losses. It has the change in working capital, and then it shows the contributions, distributions, and distributed carried interest, as well as the changes in fund level borrowing facilities. On the balance sheet, all these are linked in fairly standard ways. You'll see the fair market value of investments keep going up. You'll also see the LP and GP capital keep going up as contributions take place. As you get unrealized gains, these will also increase. And then when realizations take place, these will go back down to reflect that. In real life, you will see PE fund models that are based on specific portfolio companies. You'll see more aggressive uses of the fund level borrowing facility. You'll see working capital changes. You will see more complex carried interest calculations. So the list goes on, but it definitely gets more complex. However, what we've gone over here should be enough to answer interview questions about the main concepts required to build 3 statement models for private equity funds.